So the first important question, what do you think what was the major impact of the Treaty of Lisbon on small states within the institutions? Are small states more effective now, less effective? What do you think?
I believe that the Treaty of Lisbon would ideally have led to a dramatic reinforcement of the community method. And insofar as the community method is the best ally of small states, normally the Treaty of Lisbon and the constitutional treaty before, would factually, even though this is not always psychologically, subjectively felt like that in small states, have led to comforting their position. But since we are witnessing a rather significant number of practical underminings now of the community method, which have nothing to do with applying the treaty by the letter, but which have more to do with political contingencies, it is sad to say that since that treaty has entered into force, and since that period coincided vaguely with trying to combat what we call the crisis in all its facets, small states have tended to be left out of large parts of the picture by intergovernmental initiatives of the big ones. And that is one of the main challenges that we'll have to try and redress over the months and years to come.
Do you think it's possible to?
I know it is possible, but it will require a lot of determination, and it will above all require the determination of this House to side with the Commission while calling for the radical, resolute and uncompromising application and implementation of the community method in all policy areas. It is the duty of the Commission to suggest that, and it's the duty of the Parliament to cement that.
And
with the small states attached, so to speak, but intergovernmentally speaking, they don't have the clout, no matter who they are and who they're represented by, to stand up to the Merkels and the Sarkozys of this world and say, well, look, you have your opinions, but we have ours. That might well be so, but they will need the institutional backup, which can be provided if the institutions stand upright.
Okay. In fact, in December, if I'm not mistaken, there was the amendment, the possibility of the amendment to the Lisbon Treaty because of the Eurozone. One of the sentences was safeguarding the Eurozone and not safeguarding the small states of the Eurozone. Do you think it would have an impact, for example, if, let's say, Malta has a financial crisis and it needs money from the other countries? But if Malta isn't going to affect the strength of the euro, what do you think will be the impact?
First of all, what has been tabled so far does in no way either rescue or stabilize or comfort the Eurozone or whatever part of the Union or the Union as a whole. These are insufficient and in fact rather childish approaches of national leaders that don't see above the rim of their water glass. To what the world is expecting from us. Why is nobody attacking the United States and its currency? Half the member states of the United States are bankrupt. The United States as such is bankrupt. Why does nobody speculate against the dollar? It is not because there would be mechanisms by which Texas is bankrupt as well, but say, where do I find a wealthy state? Well, a wealthy state says, I pay for that poor state, and bankrupt state, another wealthy state said, well, then I in turn pay for that bankrupt state. It is because they have a budget through which the reallocation function of any sort of public finance system that can be stable is affected. And we don't have that. And that is the tragedy of the moment, and that is the topic that has to be addressed. As long as we don't manage to get a European budget going that has the size necessary to sustain a currency, and all preparatory reports and texts that were drafted with a view to eventually establishing monetary union said that we will need a budget of a size of between 5 and 10% of union GDP to sustain a currency. Now we have 1% of union GDP and we have the currency. In a way, it is a miracle that the currency can fly at all. But in order to comfort it through the troubles that we are facing in the world, and in order for it to be able to fend off speculative attacks, the budget needs to increase dramatically. Reallocation functions within the Union through the budget have to be enabled, and that will only be possible if we provide the Union with fiscal resources of its own. So that would stabilize the edifice at the end of the day. None of what has been tabled by heads of states and government so far can.
Okay, coming from a small state and from that perspective, if you had to change something from the Lisbon Treaty or add or delete, what would it be?
I would do what Luxembourg has been trying to do during the whole convention period. I would scrap the office of President of the Council. Because it is at the end of the day the office of President of the Council that is to a large extent responsible for all the troubles that we have today. The convention was presided over by a former President of France who, in the age of wisdom that he had attained, wanted still to gain for himself a possible other job, and he saw himself as the potential President of Europe. And for a Frenchman, the President of Europe cannot possibly mean the President of the Commission. It has to mean the one that presides over heads of states and government when they meet. And so eventually we had this function created, contrary to what people like us, Luxembourgers, in the convention always wanted. It is not the President of the Commission who presides over the council meetings, but it is somebody chosen by the council, possibly from within their ranks, as happened last time. Now that somebody doesn't have anything else to do. Result of the exercise, the council meets more and more often, because otherwise that somebody who has eventually become president of it doesn't get his days filled. And if the council meets once a month, it suddenly takes over an institutional role fundamentally detrimental to small states that was never intended for it. As long as the council met twice a year, formally, and again twice a year on a more topic-related basis, small states had nothing to fear from those council formations, because eventually they were there to even provide arbitrage in case that was really needed, in case of institutional deadlock or whatever. But if we move towards a logic where they meet once a month, and maybe even start meeting at Eurozone level, which is a totally superfluous setup, this is going to destroy the good functioning and the operationality of the community method. And that is going to be fundamentally bad and problematic for especially small states, since we are not going to be conveyed to any of the negotiating tables before such meetings take place. If the Merkels and Sarkozy and Camerons decide to meet, they will not also invite the Maltese or the Luxembourgish or the Slovene Prime Minister to their table. They will do it among themselves. So scrapping this institutionalization of the European Council would be the one and only and most relevant thing to do if we want to reinstate an institutional balance beneficial to small member states.
Okay, from a lobbyist perspective, when a lobbyist comes into the European Parliament, he intends on lobbying more on small states, on bigger states, or it depends more on the political party rather than the size of the state?
In the Parliament, it depends entirely on the relevance of any given member with respect to a given topic. All those people who come, I don't know, from the toy industry, for instance, don't care whether you are from a large or a small member state or what party you belong to. If you happen to be in charge of a report on something of relevance to them, they will lobby you to death, and the shadows included. The likelihood is it that the whole tour that they have to do of rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs will encompass people from all parties and also from both small and large member states. But the size of a state, with respect to what they do, doesn't matter. What matters is what influence they think the person lobbied has over the issue that they have at hand.
In what areas, maybe, do you think that the Lisbon Treaty has failed as concerning small states?
I wouldn't say it has failed with respect to either small states or with respect to anything else. I say it's insufficient. Just like anything short of a decent constitution for this continent is insufficient. And just like anything that leaves the fundamental question unanswered, namely, where is the integration process headed to? Where do we want to get? And where are we going to halt it because we've reached the goal? Anything that doesn't spell all this out is failing in the sense that it doesn't provide for enough. I realized that, and I was involved, having been the assistant of Jacques Hunter in the good old days. I was involved in the conventional process for the Constitution, and I was one of the, well, I could possibly even say leading actors of the referendum campaign for the Treaty of, for the Constitution in Luxembourg, really. And the Treaty of Lisbon flowed from that, even though the text was far from perfect. I campaigned for it because I believed it constituted progress. But if something constitutes progress in the middle of the first decade of the 21st century, that does not mean that as the next decade starts, new progress does not have to be made again, and I believe significant new progress is now called for.
Is there anything that you wish to add, which is related to small states and the Lisbon Treaty, which could help me more in my studies? Maybe some points which we didn't mention through our interview.
What I fundamentally believe is that you always have to look for institutional balance. And that institutional balance is at risk. Mm-hmm. We have invented the formula of the double majorities now with the Constitution first, the Treaty of Lisbon after. Not to the detriment of small states, I would say. Okay. But then, at the time when the Treaty of Lisbon was negotiated and the Constitution was drafted before, there weren't any fracture lines really between small and big states, since those in charge then of the most relevant big states still had a sensitivity for the small ones. My big problem nowadays is that I see that those that govern Germany and France and the United Kingdom and so on, well, those three mainly, have left all sensitivity for the phenomenon of the legitimacy of the small state and for the contribution that the small states have made to the European construction, be that founding members like us or be that other states like yours, in the respective areas where they've had relevance. Malta, for instance, to me, is a crucial actor in the Mediterranean policy, in the Euro-Arab dialogue, and everything that has been going on around these phenomena, and has been for decades, even long before it joined the Union. And these facts are now simply neglected, omitted, or eclipsed by those that govern Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. That is something that no treaty can either improve or avoid or change. But whatever we do in the future with treaty change, we have to bear in mind that if political practices change in the way that they have in France, in Germany, in the United Kingdom, well, they're less because it's always been more or less like that. We have to have treaty arrangements that really see to it that the community method is rock solid and cannot be circumvented. Because it is indeed the community method that saves the small states. It might not seem so. Many people always, also visitors, say to me, well, look, but what can you six do here in this big parliament of 750? Or what can 500,000 Luxembourgers do, or 500,000 Maltese, not even, with respect to 500 million Union citizens? But that is indeed the wrong question. The question is whether or not any single member of this parliament, any single state that tries to conform to the rules, can do so serenely because it knows that it is embedded in a legal setup that at the end of the day is not going to be circumvented. Mm-hmm. Right now, these things are circumvented.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.